Hey guys, and welcome to Anchor to Truth. Today we are diving into part 3 of chapter 24 in the book of Jubilees. But before we get started, let's back up just a little bit and let's reread this last part because I think we missed something on the last episode. In verse 27 it says, "And Isaac knew that day under constraint he had sworn to them to make peace with them." So I just wanted to kind of give us a recap in the beginning to just say, we're coming out of this context of Isaac swearing an oath for peace with these people. But I think something we missed was this part about constraint, right? So he's not really happy about this situation, but he did it anyway. So now that we've kind of got that in the play here, let's go on and read starting with verse 28. Joe, you ready for us?
Yeah, I just had one more thing to add to that, if it's okay.
Yeah.
I think too, to put it in a little bit more context from last week, why do we feel like he was in constraint?
Well, I mean, like you brought up in the last video, or like someone brought up, or as we read, when the guy showed up, he showed up there with his buddy, and he showed up with his great military general that was there with him, right? And it seems as the guy was saying, hey, it seems as if they were kind of humbling themselves. You're much mightier than we. You're much greater than we are. So I don't know. I mean, maybe it's just maybe he's just fighting his flesh. What do y'all think? Maybe he's going along with it, even though that's not what he really wanted to do. He made peace, and he kept the peace, even though that wasn't necessarily what he wanted to do. Maybe Isaac wanted to say, no, this place is mine. I mean, he already had been pushed out of a few areas, right? They covered in his wells, and then
we just had the
new wells, and then the new wells got, they claimed those as well, and so he's probably pretty aggravated.
But yeah, that's a good point, because backing up a little bit more in the story, we see that when he's out there, and these are his wells, let's just face it, or his dad's wells. These aren't like he went out there and was like, no, that's my well, this is my well. Matter of fact, he was having to dig the wells back up. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't even like they were, ready to rock and roll. They put all this work into it for the shepherd to show up and go, oh, by the way, that's ours. Okay, we'll keep peace. Go to the next place, dig it up. Oh, by the way, that's ours too. Okay, for Pete's sake, we'll go over to, we'll keep the peace. They're trying to keep the peace the whole time. So, yeah, then we get to this point here where it's a lot of work and a lot of this, I've never had to dig a well. I don't think you guys ever had to dig a well. But I could imagine the amount of man hours and the work it would take, because you're digging all the way down to a fresh spring. This isn't just water sitting at the bottom, like groundwater. Like here in South Carolina, you can dig 3 feet or less, and you can wait about an hour. And in some places, the hole will fill up with water. And so we're talking about they're digging down to a spring underneath the ground of fresh living water. And then we get to this part in the story here where Abimelech's showing up, and he's bringing his best friend and his general, basically. And they're saying, no, we're going to make peace. And it's kind of like, we're going to make you agree to making peace with us. And I think as we go into verse 28, we're going to kind of see where Isaac's heart really was with this, what he was really feeling after all was said and done. So.
Yeah, and I think the smallest portion of that too is just him taking that example from his father. He said, you can keep the money, but I want the people. So, I think he's kind of looking at it from that perspective, taking that example of, what, if peace involves me keeping all the people and keeping the situation at least status quo, then sure, I'll sign up for that. Just because if I have a war or we start fighting, we're not going to be focused on loving people and taking care of them anymore. We're going to, be in a different mentality. So yeah, it definitely seems like he was trying to keep that perspective of that humbleness, and that it's all about the people, like Abraham.
Amen.
All right, boys, y'all ready to get into it?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's jump into verse 28.
Here we go.
All right, it says, and Isaac on that day cursed the Philistines and said, cursed be the Philistines until the day of wrath and indignation from the midst of all nations. May Yahuwah make them a derision and a curse and an object of wrath and indignation in the hands of the sinners, the Gentiles, and in the hands of the Kittim. And whoever escapeth the sword of the enemy and the Kittim, may the righteous nation root out in judgment from under heaven, for they will be the enemies and foes of my children throughout their generations upon the earth. And no remnant will be left to them, nor one that will be saved on the day of wrath of judgment. For the destruction and the rooting out and expulsion from the earth is the whole seed of the Philistines reserved, and there will no longer be left for these captorium a name or a seed on the earth. For though he ascend unto heaven, thence will he be brought down, and though he make himself strong on earth, thence will he be dragged forth, and though he hide himself amongst the nations, even from thence will he be rooted out, and though he descend into Sheol, there also will his condemnation be great, and there also he will have no peace. And if he go into captivity by the hands of those that seek his life, will they slay him on the way, and neither name nor seed will be left to him on all the earth, for into eternal malediction will he depart. And thus it is written and engraved concerning him on the heavenly tables, to do unto him on the day of judgment, so that he may be rooted out of the earth.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
He had a few things to say.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, pressure me into this agreement. I'll show you what.
Okay, so I know this is towards the end, but I think it's probably best if we kind of start it off just to give a little bit more, just to kind of encapsulate what's being said here, what's actually going on by defining this word over here, malediction, and at the end of verse 32. So let me go ahead and do that real quick. So malediction, as a noun, there's a couple of different versions of the definition here. So I'll just read the whole thing. A magical word or phrase uttered with the intention of bringing about evil or destruction, otherwise known as a curse. And down here it also says to speak evil of, malediction, which at one time could also refer to slander or to the condition of being reviled or slandered, derives Middle English, late Latin, from the Latin verb maledicere, meaning to speak evil of or to curse. So I don't know, man. I think that kind of sums that up pretty well. So it gives a little bit more depth, I guess, to the word malediction. So this, yes, it is speaking of a curse, but I thought it was interesting that the word that was used there could also be used in the form of slander. So I don't know. I mean, is this simply just what it says? Is it simply just a curse, which that seems to be what it is? Or is this some type of slander? Or is that just kind of a English / Latin idea of what this means? I don't know. What do you guys think?
No, I would say that just from the context of what this is written here, I think it's definitely dealing with a curse more than slander, so to speak, because he's basically cursing him for eternity. It says right there at the end of 32, if you can bring that back up for us, Kyle. Right there at the end of 32, it says, for into eternal malediction will he depart. And it says, and thus it is written engraved concerning him on the heavenly tables, to do unto him on the day of judgment, so that he may be rooted out of the earth. So yeah, this is going a little bit more than just, talking bad about somebody. This is actually saying that this is going to be an eternal judgment against them. And that's pretty rough. I mean, and when we go in here and we start talking about the heavenly tables and stuff, like there seems to be something very concrete, very solidified whenever we've read through Jubilee so far, and there's that verbiage of when it's written on the heavenly tables. It's like this is recorded in the heavens forever. This isn't, just anything to be taken lightly. And so this curse that he's speaking over them, it's a pretty heavy, I don't know. I think it's pretty heavy curse to place on somebody.
Yeah. It's also interesting that this is being brought up, because generally when we think of the Philistines as a people, and we think in biblical terms, generally the David and Goliath story comes up in our minds, right?
Yeah.
When you say Philistines, that's what comes to mind. But I mean, this precedes that by quite a bit, right? And apparently there's been some rough stuff going on for a long time, and then we knew that there were some some mixing in there. There were some giants. There was some, all kind of stuff going on. So, yeah, interesting. And then there's speculation of who the Philistines are to this
Oh
very
yeah.
day, right? So I don't know anything on
Well,
that.
kind of one of the things that you did when we started this video was you kind of did a quick recap, which I actually really appreciated because that gives us, kind of a springboard to what we're getting into. And
Mhm.
then immediately in 28, he says, "And Isaac on that day." So, we're getting a little glimpse into his mentality. This isn't like, oh, I got to stew over it for about a week, or after
Right.
not having enough water, we'd have to keep digging these
Right.
wells. It's getting really annoying. You know what? Curse you guys. He was like, no, no, no. I felt what I felt and I meant what I meant. And even in this moment, the constraint was there because this is a problem. This is a big deal. And, to him, whatever the personal connection that he had, obviously we can kind of go through history and go through, the biblical narrative to get a better understanding. But he had, it seems, some kind of personal, I don't want to call it a vendetta, but hey, you wronged me and my people. So because of that, I'm going to react this way. And it says that, like I said, start off with it on that day. So he's giving them, the people group there, like an immediate reaction. So it's kind of a wonder of it, we're supposed to be slow to anger, right, and quick to listen, these kind of things. I wonder if, like, maybe this was not to say a fault of his, but it's kind of a little bit of a warning for us to kind of look at, of like, oh yeah, our immediate reaction is going to be, yeah, we want to curse everybody. We want to, like the Sons of Thunder, hey Jesus, they're talking bad about you, why don't we go kill them? He's like, no, 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 guys, hold on, you're missing the point. If we kill them,
Right.
we can't get them saved. So let's teach them the message first and see how that goes. So I wonder, how that played a factor in here. I mean, obviously it's talking about, the day of great wrath and the end time. So he even has an understanding of, like, a good understanding of eschatology. And hey, there is going to be a day of wrath coming. There's going to be a day of
Hmm.
judgment. There is a Sheol. There is a one day when all nations are being judged. So it's interesting to see, like, in this curse, he's actually preaching a little bit and giving us some heavy Bible knowledge. So it's interesting that we get it, and it's interesting that the angel of presence was like, "Hey Moses, by the way, I want you to write this part down." And we didn't have to have this, and so there's a reason for it in there, more than just Isaac cursing the Philistines. There's some nuggets in there that we really can pull out. So far, I think we've done a really good job of finding at least the beginning part of that.
I'm glad you brought that up. I want to go back and look at that word constraint a little further too. I found something I thought to be kind of interesting. I wanted to get you guys' take on it. So, I thought that was an odd term to be used there. Typically in our modern language, we might say that under duress or coercion,
Hmm.
Mhm.
or something like that, right? But the word that's used here is constraint, and I'm like, let me look at this a little further. So, constraint, the definition, a limitation or restriction. Well, yeah, I mean that's the oath that he was taking, but it says that under constraint he had sworn to them to make peace with them. So it says a limitation or restriction, and then there's a sub definition that I thought was really interesting. So the nation that Isaac is known by is through his son Jacob.
Hmm.
Jacob becomes what?
Israel.
Israel. Check this out. Constraint, limitation or restriction, but also stiffness of manner and inhibition in relations between people. Stiffness. I thought that was very interesting
Mm.
because they're also known as a what? A stiff-necked people.
Mm.
So I don't know.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
might be some connections we can make there. I don't know. Okay, Joe,
Well,
what you got?
what we do see here, though, is because of this interaction that takes place. That if you go back to that screen real quick where you were, Kyle, we see that it says right there on this little side note, it says the Philistines are a longtime enemy of Israel, even housing Nephilim among them. such as Goliath. So
Mhm.
it's almost like this was that hinge point here in the relationships, the relationship between God's people and the Philistines. Is, after this curse takes place, that's pretty much a sealed deal. And you're going to see that they're going to be a thorn in the side of Israel going forth all the way up to Goliath. Then we see what happens there with their warring against that, and then they bring out their mighty man, and then the whole story with David. But you see that this is that pivotal moment where he's like, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I'm going to say, and then henceforth from there, it's like, again, Philistines are now going to be a thorn in the side of Israel all the way through.
There are. I'm not sure where I am on the whole "who is the Philistines today" kind of thing. There are some that would say that the Philistines is the Palestinians.
Mm.
Yeah, and I think a lot of that has to do with just because of how similar the names are. Um, and maybe somebody can justify that in another way, back that up, or whatever. Here's the thing that we have to be very careful of, and I'm sure you guys agree with me on that. But the thing that we need to be very careful of is segregating peoples by their groups just because of what they are
Mm-hmm.
now. What I mean by that is, let's just assume for a moment that the Palestinians are the Philistines of old. Let's just say that were the case. Are there Palestinians that have been converted over to
Mm-hmm.
believe in,
Yeah,
to now follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob?
absolutely.
Sure, right? So, but once they have done so, they are no longer Palestinians. They're no longer Philistines. Once
That's
they have
correct.
done that, they have crossed over, right? Hebrew, they have crossed over, and they are now part of Israel.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that they can't. It's
Mhm.
who you are defined by on that day, as what on that judgment day is what's going to
Absolutely.
determine,
Yep.
what that is. So
Well,
so
we have the. I'm sorry.
no, just to finish up, it's not for us to make enemies out of somebody because of their nationality. It's to share the gospel, share the truth with them, that they have the opportunity to become Israel, right? And receive the
Absolutely.
blessings and get away from the curse. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we have the example there with Ruth and Naomi. I mean, Ruth basically saying, "I will serve your God. Your God will be my God." There was, now you are now part of this, and then we have John 3:16. For God so loved the world, that would be everyone in the world. So it gives, that, and, basically the Father saying, hey, you have an opportunity, even if you were born into a people group that I said was cursed from a long time ago, but you make the decision to say, hey, I'm going to follow the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, then salvation is available for all people, all groups, no matter who you are in the world. And that's the amazing love and grace that our Father extends to everyone.
Yeah, and Kyle, what I'm going to do is kind of turn your statement maybe a little bit on its head, just to give a different perspective there. But when we go back into verse 30, it starts off by saying, "And no remnant will be left to them." So I thought that was a very interesting statement, because no is no, any is any, and all is all. So, how do we kind of let that play out? So I'm reading some history up on that and trying to understand, okay, what are these Philistines? Where are they? What are they doing? We could try to associate different groups like you mentioned. It
Mm-hmm.
might be just in attempts to try to find a group versus actually finding out what happened. So I was reading from worldhistory.org, and it says that the Philistines began their decline with the invasion of the areas of Canaan by the Neo-Assyrian Empire in 722 BC, when the Assyrian king Sargon II invaded Philistia, Egypt, promoted and funded rebellions against the Assyrians. In the next 10 years, Sargon's son, Sennacherib, I did my best, put down all rebellions and destroyed their cities. Jerusalem held out, but was later destroyed by the Babylonians in 587 BC. This is the last we hear of the Philistines. So it's interesting that, according to history, there's an end date to Philistines. It seems like they stayed a little while. They kind of hung out. They hung on the best they could. But it's like, I mean, if Isaac's curse had any validity to it, it seemed to have played out throughout history that we have no more. We show no more. There's no written language. There's no, there's nothing that really carried forward from them that we can really use to help prove anything out today, right? I mean, the 587 BC, and we're talking 2,600 years ago, and that's the last that we hear of them. And now if they have some kind of remnant along the way, kind of like Joe was saying, maybe a onesie twosies assimilated in with the group, well, then they're a part of the group. They're no longer Philistine. They're a
Right.
Egyptian
Exactly.
or an Israeli or a Jordanian or whatever. They're something else.
Right.
So it's interesting that it, history played out that way, but also back in 30, it goes on to say, nor one that will be saved on that day of the wrath of judgment. So Isaac's saying, okay, yeah, you're going to be out of here from a physical, tangible sense, but also don't forget there's a second death that's a part of this equation. You're going to die, right? You're out of here. Like every human's, it's destined that all men are to die once. These guys were just accursed and then died. But he's saying what really is going to be the distinguishing factor is when you get to the other side, when it's your turn to, walk up and face the great white throne, you go to face God Almighty and say, what were your deeds and how did you live? He's like, that's the time where you said that no one, nor will you be saved then either. So you're not being saved on earth or on the second back end of it. Again, showing that Isaac really has an understanding of the end times and has an understanding of judgment, has an understanding of right and wrong. There's just so much jam packed into these little statements that he's kind of throwing out. Even though it's a curse, he's given us so much knowledge along the way. But yeah, to watch history play out accordingly really helps to validate these points he's making.
Yeah, it seems. I mean, assuming the historical account that you just read there that we have available to us, assuming that is correct, then it seems as if the nation of the Philistines is
Right.
done. Right? They're gone. Does that mean that every man, woman, and child that was a Philistine was done away with? Again, probably not. They probably kind of was grafted into various other nations and that sort of thing, right? So they are now Jordanians or Egyptians or wherever, right? So I think we're on the same page when it comes to this remnant. I think this has more to do with what that nation represented.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a potential here that it's more about what that nation represented, because regardless of what someone calls themselves, you could call yourself an American, but if your actions and your worship and your everything else is a representation of what these Philistines were, you're going to be judged as a Philistine, right? You'll have there'll be the same conclusion. I put it like that, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I think we're on the same page there. I think we all agree on that. I think that's pretty enlightening. But no, I didn't know that about them being wiped out. So that's pretty interesting. Over here on the side, it says, I'll go ahead and read this. It says the Philistines came originally from Captor. Yeah, something like that. According to Amos 9:7, and it gives some other scripture references. Renders the ancestor of the Philistines as a Casmonium or Hasmonean. That faction from Modian, Samaria, cannot be inserted into Jubilees as the authors are not authors nor favorable. Does that make sense to you guys?
That last part? No, but it's all right. So the when that one you have highlighted there, Kyle, where it says Captorum.
Mm-hmm.
I looked that up. It says Captorum is also known as Caphtorites or Captorum, and are named as a division of the ancient Egyptians. So this is kind of alluding back to the Philistines, part of the ancient Egyptians, basically. So coming out of that area. And then I looked up the name, the Hebrew meaning for the Philistines, and it means invader. So I thought it was interesting as well.
What about this thought? So going back over here to this line of thought that we're looking at here, this other thing that I have highlighted in the middle, it says the whole seed of the Philistines. And if we look at ancient Egypt, right, the things that are remaining there, the pyramids, the Sphinx, all that stuff, right? Where's the history that connects modern Egypt to ancient Egypt? We don't have any. It's like the history of that area just vanished for a while.
Yeah,
Maybe this is why.
yeah.
Maybe that's the case. Maybe they were just, that's it. They were
Mhm.
done, and they assimilated into other, whoever was left, if there was anybody left. I mean, this does say the whole seed of the Philistines, but again, I kind of have this idea in my head that that's not every man, woman, and child. That's anyone who represents themselves or presents themselves as a Philistine.
So let me throw this out there, and let's for a little bit of discussion. If this curse is going to the Philistines, and the Philistines are part of Caphtorim, which is a part of ancient Egypt, going all the way into, because this is this is before this story here. This is way before we're getting to Moshe in the children of Israel. So what if this curse that's carried on here through the Philistines, if they are associated with Egypt, and that curse is being carried on to the fact that when God gets to Pharaoh, all the things that happen there, and basically when God leaves, that place is decimated.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's done. I mean, from vegetation to people to animal livestock. I mean, we're talking about a people group that's very much destroyed.
Mhm.
And then we know going forward from there. I mean, you can look at modern day Egypt right now. It's not I mean, other than going there to see the pyramids, it's not a desirable looking place to go.
Right.
To go there and hang out for like a couple of weeks. It's like, okay, we saw the pyramids, we saw the Sphinx, we saw all these different things. But you look, whenever I see Egypt in my spirit, and this is the longest, even before we read this, the word curse come to my mind. This is a cursed land. This is a place where when God left out of here, that was a wrap. I don't really hear of Egypt fully recovering, I guess. I mean, I know that Egypt's still there because in the time of Yeshua, we know that he goes there to hide out for a little while. But I don't think Egypt ever got back to the splendor and grandeur that it was beforehand, before all that took place. So just kind of in my mind, making some mental connections here with this cursing of them that took place. So
Mm.
take it for what you will.
Yeah, I mean that Egypt connection is definitely there. I mean, that was part of some of the studies that I was going through. Is that they spent some time down there in Egypt, and it's interesting that God uses Egypt so many times to like feed the world. And Joe, like you were saying, I mean that's not the case anymore at all. It's quite the
Mhm.
opposite. We got cotton. I think is like the main cool thing that we read about, like with sheets. We got Egyptian cotton, and that's kind of it. Maybe a few like random things like dates or whatever, but. Whenever we're going back and looking through that, we also get another word in there that was in verse 28, which was kittim, or however you'd say that, Kittim.
Yeah,
And
Kittim.
looking through that, that's a old reference to Cyprus. Now, as you start reading through Scripture, Cyprus plays a factor in there all kind of throughout. It's that little, well, it's not very little. It's an island between Turkey and where we have like Israel and all that today, out there in the
Mhm.
water. And when you read it as it's going through there, it says that that the curse, and they will be an object of wrath and indignation in the hands of the sinners, the Gentiles, and the hands of Kittim or Kittim. So it's interesting to see, like, he's not just saying, "Oh, we're going to go take you out." Isaac never comes back around and hey, let's circle the wagon and take these guys out. He's like, no, no,
Mhm.
no. The nations are going to be the ones who judge you. And I wonder, Isaac's kind of prophetically, but historically speaking on like how God has normally worked with Israel. Every
Mm-hmm.
time Israel messes up, the nations come in and they put him in captivity, or they're oppressing them or whatever. So he's like, hey, the same way that God's dealing with us for our wrongs, God's going to deal with you in that same way for your wrongs. And we know, when Joe, like you were talking about, where you see Egypt kind of have that shift of like, what happened? You see like Alexander the Great, and you see like the libraries there in Alexandria where they get burnt down, and
Mhm.
there's just so many things where it's like, oh yeah, the nations are all over the place. Rome comes through, Greece comes through, the Ottoman empires, all these giant empires just come through and just sweep through. They're like, get all this out of here. It's almost as like I'm not going to say that it wasn't a fight, but it kind of feels like, they're just the next people to come through at their conquest. It's just it's a stepping stone toward wherever they're trying to go. They're not even whatever. It's not even a big deal. So it's just funny to read it that way, that like the sinners and the Gentiles, and then you see nations come in and you're just like, oh, we got this. Egypt, no big deal.
Right.
Same thing with Jerusalem. A lot of times, they come through and they're like, yeah, okay, Jerusalem, yeah, we'll take that. And you're like, oh, well, what happened? There's like, oh, it's ours now. So it's just interesting to watch how that plays out during the times of when the people are either cursed or not following God.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Let me read this over here on the side too, being as you brought up Kittim already. Kittim or Kittim or whatever. Kittim is often associated with Greece and the Roman Empire. These are associated in the War Scroll in league with those who will oppose Israel unto the very final battle. It is also part of the Psalm 83 enemies. How about
then you
that?
can go down and read that last little part, finish that out, Kyle.
Sure.
The righteous nation is Israel, the people, not a land necessarily.
That's right. Absolutely.
Yep. Context is key there.
Yep.
Yes, it is.
I thought this was interesting. In 29, it says, and whoever escapeth the sword of the enemy and the Kittim, may the righteous nation root out in judgment from under heaven. So in other words, you ain't gonna make it out alive. Right. Even if you escape the sword of the enemy and the Kittim and all that, even if you escape all of that, doesn't matter. They're gonna be rooted out.
Hey,
yeah, but that kind of. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jonathan.
Yeah. All right, go up just a touch. Or no, right there. Okay. All right. So if we look at the right column there, over on the right side, where it starts with, and neither name nor seed will be left to him on all the earth. And so that was kind of where I was hoping to use that to validate that point where they were going through the, the encyclopedia of saying like, oh, there's no more Philistine name. And, we can literally go to a map today, Google anything you want. There's no Philistine or Philistia that doesn't exist anymore. It's all the way gone. We might want to associate it with another people group or try to figure out where they fit in today. But it's interesting that even in Jubilees, it goes as far as to say, like you said earlier, Kyle, about, the sword. It's like, oh, no, you don't get to escape. Not only do you not get to escape, just so you know, your people group, the land, the group, the moniker, the flag, the whatever you thought you were, that's out of here. Now, there's still going to be righteous people. There's still going to be people that repent because God always gives people a chance to repent. But outside of that, this story is over for you. When we're going to write the final chapter, and that's it.
Yeah, and man, this is also, guys. This is not just Isaac saying something, right? This is a reality. This is not just him being upset and saying, "Oh, I curse you." No, this is actually happening, and I'm going to point it out right here. So it says in verse 33, and thus it is written and engraved concerning him on the heavenly tables, to do unto him on the day of judgment, so that he may be rooted out of the earth. So this is not, remember, this is Moses writing this down as given to him by an angel, right? So the angel's telling Moses that this was written down on the heavenly tables. Like, this is a thing. This is going to happen. This ain't just Isaac saying, forget you guys. This is real deal Holyfield right here.
Right. It wasn't just Isaac having a bad day and then throwing out and just getting something off of his chest. It says, like you just said, it is engraved. It means that's forever. So these words have power behind them. Which
and it's almost like
be careful. I'll just say, be careful what you say.
That's what I was going to say.
Oh, okay. See,
so I'll be careful what I say.
Hey, Kyle, if you could pull up verse 31, I'd like to dig into that one just a little bit.
All right.
Because this, again, Isaac's being very specific here. This isn't, again, him just getting it off his chest. This isn't just him, I'm so mad at these guys, I'm just going to blurt out some stuff. He's being very specific here. He says in verse 31, he says, for though he ascend unto heaven, thence he will be brought down. And though he make himself strong on the earth, thence he will be dragged forth. And though he hide himself among the nations, even from thence he will be rooted out. And though he descend into Sheol, he says, there also will his condemnation be great, and there also he will have no peace. Holy smokes. He's basically saying it don't matter if you even try to get into heaven, or even if you're in Sheol, judgment's coming, brother. I mean, no matter what you're doing here, he's saying you're going to be dragged from one end to the other. What do you think, Jonathan?
Yeah, actually, so it's kind of interesting because I'm really always enjoying, if you guys remember from chapter 1, we're still testing out these books and really trying to understand the connections and how they fit into the canon of 66 and what is Moses doing, what is the angel of presence doing. So what's really cool here is that whole section Joe just read for us is almost a verbatim quote out of Amos, Amos chapter 9. So I'm just going to read that for you guys real quick. That's Amos chapter 9, verses 2-4. And it says, if they dig into Sheol, from there shall my hand take them. If they climb up to heaven, from there I will bring them down. If they hide themselves on the top of Carmel, from there I will search them out and take them. And if they hide from my sight at the bottom of the sea, there I will command the serpent, and it shall bite them. And if they go into captivity before their enemies, there I will command the sword, and it shall kill them. And I will fix my eyes upon them for evil and not for good. So like a very interesting way to write. It's we don't really write that way today, but it's telling you from top to bottom, like Joe said, wherever you're at and whatever there's no escape. And I think we kind of see some of that language in Revelation. They're going to try to hide in the caves and escape the tribulation. It's like, no, that's not going to happen. If it's going to happen, it's going to happen. If it's meant to be, then God's going to make sure that we are accountable for our actions, whether they be good or bad. And in this situation, obviously bad. But what a warning for us, and what a direction for us to kind of live our lives of, every word and deed, is how we need to serve God, and we need to honor him in those things, and ensure that whatever the bad is, that we're pruning ourselves and we're allowing, iron to sharpen iron and the scriptures to reveal those things in our lives. But at the same time, to root out that bad and that negative, because God's like, I have to, unless it's a forgiven scenario, then I have to hold you accountable for it. Because that's what the deeds you had on this earth. So yeah, very interesting that this verse 31 is lining up almost verbatim with Amos 9.
So I find something pretty interesting here. I'd just like to get you guys' take on this. And by the way, guys, let us know down in the comments too what y'all think about this. This one's kind of got me going a little bit. So back over here in 31. Some of this stuff seems pretty straightforward. And though he make himself strong on the earth, thence he will be dragged forth. Makes sense. And though he hide himself amongst the nations, and though he descend into Sheol, and all this stuff, right? First of all, two things. Is he being used in the sense of he meaning the general population of the Philistines? Or is he a reference to maybe a principality or ruler over that area? So that's my first question. Who is this he? And secondly, if it's not a principality, what could we be talking about right here when it says, for though he ascend unto heaven, thence he will be brought down? Are we talking about, what are we talking about? What are y'all's thoughts?
Well, we talked about it earlier. We brought up the whole idea of what are the Philistines known for? What are they known by in the biblical account? Giants, Goliath, stuff like that. So I was reading that and kind of understanding, and Kyle, I mean, I wasn't going to go there with it, but it's an interesting thought process of, is it something spiritual, or even in that extreme case of a Nephilim type of conversation where it's, you've made yourself strong on the earth. Well, yeah, those guys are pretty strong, and if they're as tall as we understand them to be potentially throughout some of the biblical narrative, then yeah, you've tried to ascend into heaven. And so it's this weird kind of dynamic in the wording that's used there, where it's like it opens the door for some of that. Not necessarily that it has to be, but it definitely lends to some more thought process going into it,
Mhm.
and maybe trying to see if we can contextually find out some more clues in there, maybe, chapter before or after, to see, hey, is there something a little more going on here than we think? Because when we read through the 12 Testament of the 12 patriarchs, we see that there, and that this is predating that. So it's an interesting thought process to kind of look into for sure.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm in agreement. I think that can go into what you guys are talking about. And also, I think just from reading the verse right 30 before that, it is talking about the people group, the Philistines, and all that stuff. So I think the he could also just be that is talking about the seed of the Philistines themselves. Because when we go down to the end of 32, Kyle, if you bring it up for me, sir. This is something here that we've talked about. I see you've got it highlighted, which is cool. It says, "And neither name nor seed will be left to him on all the earth." We talked about earlier
To him. Sorry, go ahead.
about. Oh, it's okay. We talked earlier about in our earlier studies. We talked about the name. One of the things that was very important is when your name goes forth, and when our name goes forth, we want to go forth in a good way, not in a bad way. And
Mhm.
so, like with the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, we know that the patriarchs of old, that their name is going forth till now, thousands and thousands of years later, we're still talking about Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And so we know that their name, which is one of the prayers I believe that Abraham had, was that the name would go forth, right? And so there's a blessing that comes with that. So in here, because of this curse, the curse is, it says, neither name nor seed will be left to all on the earth. So as when it's talking about the name, and again today, think about it, guys. We're talking about them now in this tense, but that's it. We don't really, past David and Goliath and all that stuff that happened. At some point in history, they're gone.
Mhm.
There is no more, like you said, Jonathan. There is no more looking on the map and seeing, hey, where do the modern day Philistines live at? We have
Right.
no idea. They've either assimilated into other people groups throughout the through time and all that stuff, or they literally were all they're all gone.
Mhm.
And so we see that how important, again, because if I think it's very specific why Isaac is saying about their name. Your name at some point will go forth no more. There will be at some point in history you're done. At some point, you're going to be forgot about, literally. And if it wasn't for the scriptures, if it wasn't for Jubilees and the different writings, we really wouldn't think about the Philistines at all. But
Mhm.
we see here that because of the words that are spoken by Isaac as a people group, at some point you're done. Your name will never go forth in a good light ever again. And so I just thought that was important to bring up about the importance of our name. When my name goes forth in history, I want my children, my grandchildren, and them after them. I want them to speak well of Father Joe, of Papa Joe, Pastor Joe, and not for my sake, but when my name goes forth, I want to be a blessing unto my generations. I want to be a blessing unto Yahuwah. I want to be a good thing going forth, not a bad thing.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I see this more as the name nor seed will be left to him on all the earth. My understanding is that's, you know, judgment, right?
Yeah,
Because I mean, like you guys said, I mean, we're literally speaking about the Philistines right now, so their name is going forth, in a sense. It's being discussed, definitely not in a good way.
no, that's my main point on that was it's not in
Yeah,
a good way.
yeah,
So what we see with all of this, with Isaac and his curse, right? We're kind of like, man, Isaac, what's going on, dude? Why are you so angry? But at the same time, we're definitely called to pursue righteousness. And Abraham taught his son very well. And you can see that throughout the way that he's talking through this curse. He's not just blurting out a bunch of expletives. He's really going into some very important information and some ideas and concepts that we're still trying to figure out yet today. He's speaking on Sheol and ascending into heaven and being accountable for all of our actions and our deeds. And he's going as far as to say that these things, these words, even these concepts, they are literally written and inscribed on the heavenly tablets to make sure that these events happen, right? We read earlier with Abraham that the angel came down and made sure that this covenant was solid. He was like, I want to make sure we have a witness. And so this angel that was here at the time, and especially the one that's speaking to Moses, saying, hey, I'm a witness to all these actions, to this curse, but yet at the same time, it wasn't done out of anything that was incorrect. This was done in the proper way, apparently, because it was able to make it all the way into the history, and it played out exactly how Isaac said it was going to play out. So we are ultimately accountable for what we do and what we say. We got to hold every word captive, but also remember that we serve God in every word and deed, and know that we serve a good God. And he's on our, when you have a God who's on our side, on your side, we're in his good graces, and everything will go well for us, especially all into eternity. If not, you might have to call yourself a Philistine.
Amen. And with that, we will see you next time for chapter 25 in the book of Jubilees. God bless.
Shalom.
Ciao.